Okay, we're live. Yay! Hey, Tactical Imagination Club. Let's make sure. Oh, good, it's working. It's working over on Facebook. It's amazing. Okay, so now that we're waiting, Sarah, for a few other people to show up, we can take deep breaths. And for people who watch the recording, you can know that what we're doing is recovering from an entire half hour, possibly mercury insanity, get to the screen at the same time, which doesn't feel like it should be that hard in this day and age, but sometimes it is. It was so hard. We probably both need to cry. We could start our live stream crying. That would actually be a good hook. If we ever collaborate, like on a live video thing or a podcast, we could always start each episode crying.
I think that would really project confidence. Trust me,
definitely would. It might attract an audience, but it might not be the audience that we want, actually. Okay, someone's in here watching us. Hello, whoever you are. Say hello. Say hello to us. Okay, I think we should start. Definitely would.
I can.
Oh, wait a minute.
Hear now.
Okay.
Hear now?
Okay, I just. Yeah, but no. Do you hear it anymore? Okay, it's because I accidentally turned the volume on my Facebook Live. So, and then I turned it off. Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome Tactical Imagination Club and anyone else who is joining us today. I have with me a very, very dear friend and brilliant genius, Sarah Sentilles, who is here today to talk with me and to talk to all of you about talking about and writing about art. So this is particularly important and useful for the artists in our group, but I also think much of what we're going to talk about today is totally relevant to those of us building businesses. And Sarah, I spent some time as I was walking to the coffee shop today thinking about this conversation and thinking about all the parallels between where artists struggle to think about or to talk about their work and do it justice and really communicate what it is, and where so many other people with businesses or other kinds of projects struggle to actually talk about what they're doing in a substantial way. So I think there's a lot of good parallels there. So I want to just say to anyone who's watching, we are in Crowdcast and we're live streaming into Facebook, and that means there's a pretty significant delay. Like the usual delay that you get in Facebook Live is doubled now. So we want to find out what you're thinking. We want to answer your questions. We want your responses. So please feel free to respond and comment and talk to each other and talk to us and put your questions in. And after we've been talking for a little while, we're going to go read what's been accumulating and kind of respond all at once. So welcome, Sarah. I'm so glad you're here. Will you tell everybody some more about who you are, because my intro to you was not exactly a comprehensive bio. You don't have to give a comprehensive bio, but just talk about a little bit about your background and the things that you're working on now that you're excited about.
Sure. I don't know where to start. I grew up in, maybe we'll start there. I grew up in art history college, and I was an elementary school teacher in California. Oh, and
Sarah, I'm going to interrupt you for a second because we're having technical problems again. If you could believe it. Yeah. Your voice is going in and out. I wonder if you're, if you have a headset, if that would help. Okay, go ahead. Hopefully your kitty will come back and entertain us all. So this is Sarah's chair. I'll hop over to Facebook and see who's in here with us right now. Let's see. Let's make sure this is all working. I hope this works, Sarah. If it doesn't, we might just have to let the technology gods win.
Let's try.
Because this is kind of ridiculous. Okay, there's some folks in here. Say hi, everybody. Maybe you have, and I'm not seeing it because of the delay.
Can you hear
me? I don't know.
Okay.
Start again, and we'll see, because it kind of goes. I can't tell yet.
I studied art history in college, and then I was an elementary school teacher in Compton, California, and confronted my own complicity and structural racism and inequality. And at that time, I started going to church and thought that churches could be places that could fight racism. So I thought I wanted to be an Episcopal priest. But then I realized I didn't believe in God, so that was kind of a problem. And I was writing. What?
Slight conflict. Just slight conflict.
But I started writing, and I went to graduate school to study religion, to study theology, and realized that I understood art and religion to be these meaning-making enterprises that help people orient the world and remake the world. So that's kind of what draws me to art. I think it gives me more hope than anything in the world. It models this idea that we can remake our world in a more just and life way. I've also written 4 books. My most recent book is called Draw Your Weapons, and it's also about art. And I taught at an art school for 5 years and really fell in love with working with artists. So now I'm writing full time, and I want to keep working with artists. So I'd like to help them write more kick-ass artists.
And your services are so desperately
Well, I was thinking
needed.
This morning as I was preparing how weird it would be as a writer. I was asked to submit a drawing whenever I applied for a fellowship. Like there's something, like why are artists required to write something when they try to get a fellowship or a grant? I'm not required to draw anything.
Right. Yep. That is such a good point, because so many people have such a hard time making that translation. And often, the thing I always struggle with writing artist statements is that it always, in translating it, something always got lost. So I felt like the statement always somehow undermined the work. And I think part of that is because I needed help writing the statements more effectively. And part of it, just what you're saying, you'd never have to submit a drawing. I'd be interested to see what your drawings would be that you'd submit for Draw Your Weapons.
Book cover, but I didn't have to make that.
Yeah.
And there's something, right. I think partly they're hard. Artist statements are hard because a lot of artists don't think of themselves as writers. Most people don't think of themselves as writers. Mm-hmm. But I'm a writer, and I have to write statements about my own work. Yeah. And I find that incredibly challenging. If you sit down at a blank page and try to summarize the art that you make, it's nearly impossible.
And for me and so many people I know, it's so fraught with different kinds of feelings. Like, there's that when you read other people's artist statements, of course, there's the whole gamut from horrible to wonderful. But there's so much art world code and academic signaling and class stuff. There's so much cultural baggage of all different kinds or there can be in artist statements. And so, I remember at one point in graduate school trying to write a statement for something, and I'm thinking to myself, I've been an artist all my life. I went to undergraduate for painting. I went to graduate school for sculpture. I am getting ready to teach in universities, and I still feel really stupid when I try to write an artist statement. There's something I don't understand about how I'm supposed to
I think that's a big problem. I think there's a lot of shoulds. We have in our mind the kind of jargon we should use, or kind of obfuscating language that makes us sound smart, instead of writing clearly and directly. Right. And I think that's a lot about our perception about how other people think about art, that it somehow needs fancy words to make it relevant, or to make it seem like
Or like you need a PhD to be able to look at art. I hear comments like that all the time. Like, I don't understand this painting. I would need a PhD to understand it.
Either you
which
need
is
PhD
true.
or you think I could make that.
Right. There's so much getting lost in translations, right? And I'm just thinking, listening to you, what a good opportunity it is for writers and artists to collaborate. Because as you were talking about your background and what you do, I mean, you wrote this book, which is so much about art and so many other things too. But you've also written reviews of exhibitions, and you've helped artist friends write their stuff. And there's a great collection of essays on Sarah's blog, if you guys want to go check it out, at sarahsentilles.com. So you've made it part of your craft and part of your work to think about and write about art. And, many folks who are doing visual art more exclusively, their craft is to do the visual side. And so collaborations between artists and writers, I think, is a really interesting, like what if every writer got a visual artist to collaborate with, and every visual artist got a writer to collaborate with? It'd be amazing. And then you would have to submit a drawing to your book.
But I wouldn't have to make it, so it'd be okay.
You wouldn't have to make it, exactly.
I think that writing is a tool that can help us better understand our own work. And that's the approach I try to take in these artist statement writing workshops, is that it should be an exercise that helps the artist put to language the kind of magical thinking that's going on in their own body that they might not have access to. So I try to approach it kind of from the side. If you sit down and you say, I'm going to write a statement, you're going to write nothing worth reading. But there's a way you can get at it by doing a bunch of exercises that bring you to the deepest truths about why you choose to dedicate your life to being an artist. That can help you see your art in a way that will then illuminate it for others. Is
it kind of like generating all the raw material first before you start trying to translate it for the grant maker or the
remembering you have to write so many bad sentences to get like 11 good ones. That's all you need. You need like a dozen good sentences.
Yeah. Right. It doesn't seem like it should be that hard, right? I love that you're saying this, but because this is what I teach and encourage people around all the time with the visual work is 90% of it's going to suck and you're going to throw it away, but you had to make it so that you could find the other 10%. And you had to make it so that you can generate surprises and discover things. Yeah. So, I was thinking about the parallels between artists writing about art and business folk writing about business, writing about their work, communicating about their work. And similarly, there's all these codes in the business world. Like there's all these formulas and all this advice that you're supposed to follow about how to make marketing copy that converts and how to position yourself. And, there's all these languages, all this language and all these kind of like triggers and signals that you're supposed to use to position yourself. And a lot of the people in the Tactical Imagination Club are here not just to think about how to communicate visually, and it's the whole gamut, people who are visual artists, who claim themselves to be visual artists, and people who claim themselves to be not visual artists. I always question those folks because if they end up in my group, I usually realize that they're an artist at some point, and they do too. Where's my train of thought? So many of the business folk in here do some kind of transformative work, like they do coaching work, they do work that's based on deep listening, that's based on counseling in many ways, that's based on trying to change culture or create new culture or do social activism work. So there's a lot of powerful work being done that's drawing on skills that are sometimes hard to describe and that are sometimes hard to communicate. And often when people do try to communicate those things, it feels trite, or it feels like the formulas or whatever, which feels like the biggest connection between that and what artists struggle with. And also a lot of these professions are kind of feminized, you know, or they're treated with sexism or whatever, like the kind of listening and helping professions. And so people put their stuff out there and feel like it's not as serious, it's not as important. And artists struggle with that so much. Like, who am I to say something really profound about this thing I made? You know, it's just this thing I made, or I think it's really profound, but it's so vulnerable to put it out there and talk about it with confidence, even if you might have confidence standing next to it, right? So, but like writing about it just brings up this whole other level of like imposter feelings.
That's so true. I feel that as a writer of books, you know, once you finish a book, your publisher asks you to say what it's about. Like, I don't know, you know, or yeah, you know, at a deep level that it matters to the world, or you wouldn't have spent years making it or writing it, and you wouldn't dedicate your life to the kind of work that you're doing. But to overcome the sexist messages, all the messages against being an artist, like we all have those voices in our head. What are you doing? You're wasting your time. Who do you think you are? Artists never make any money. Why would you do that? You're already starting from the margin. So I think part of the challenge is claiming that position and diving deep in a way that reveals that you trust your own choices about the work you're doing in the world. And how do you write about how profound that it is without making it sound like a cliche? It's hard.
Yeah, that's beautiful though, like claiming your position at the margins, because of course as soon as we started talking about sexism, all the other oppressions, racism and classism and all the things, I mean, it's so, I think the larger cultural narratives about art and artists make it feel like almost nobody can belong in that category. But what you're saying is such a twist on that. Like, in a way, nobody belongs because we are all on the margins, because we're doing something that does defy like big, dominant, sweeping, general narratives, because we're doing something very deeply internal, even if we're like engaging with the larger world.
Because you're also making something instead of consuming something. I mean, I know you can't separate the art world from capitalism because it's enmeshed in that, especially in terms of museum culture and galleries and auction and all that. But at its base, it's an act of saying, I can make my world, and the world that I find myself in is made, and racism is made, so it can be unmade.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a profoundly hopeful act.
Yeah, and that's really what you've built so much of your work and your writing around, is that act, right? I feel like so much of what you do is about that, you know, illuminating that.
That's why I actually like working with artists and teaching. I was teaching critical theory to artists, and they were so different from other students I'd had because they already understood the world as makers. They could see that the world was constructed. So if you told them gender is a construction, they were like, oh, that makes sense to me. You know?
Isn't it everything? Yeah.
Not threatening to their worldview.
Yeah. So for the artists in the group specifically, because it's kind of hard to cover it for everyone, but I trust that the business builders in the group who don't identify as artists will kind of absorb some of the usefulness of this too. Like, are there a few questions or prompts or bits of advice that you have about getting started with the artist statement, or for people who are just super stuck with talking about their work in general, putting words to what they do in general?
If that would be useful for your community, I would be willing to do a workshop for business people. That would be fun for people.
Oh, that would be cool. We should.
But I mostly have
Yes, because can I jump on that for a second? I love that idea because there are a lot of artists who are building their business as artists, utilizing the resources and the education of the business world, which is really, really useful. But there are big pieces that the business world doesn't address and doesn't cover about how to talk about. In the business world, everything is about like conversion to sales. So there's this very, very customer focused way of constructing your language. And for visual artists, it gets really difficult because first of all, in the art world places that we write, we have to write about ourselves, what we're interested in, why we do what we do. And in the business context, there's a lot of encouragement not to talk about yourself, but to focus on your customer and their problems and things like that. So there's this big piece that there's a big missing links for artists around kind of merging the commerce piece of it and the other pieces of communication about visual art that are so important. So I think that workshop would be a great gift.
I would love to do
people in the community. And also business people are missing something by not looking at these other ways of communicating.
Yeah, it would be my hope that the workshop helps people be able to talk about the work that they're choosing to do in a way that feels authentic and deep and helps them understand themselves better, that it's not just outward looking or trying to make money, but to connect to that meaning making element that's part of all of our work.
Yeah. Right. And then when they go back out to do the sort of marketing language stuff, their own voice is that much stronger and more clear, which is so crucial, but so overlooked. Okay. So back to your advice. What do we do?
What do I do in the workshop? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, no, what do we do? Like, so for those of us who are struggling with how to articulate what's most important about what we do as artists or with whatever our work is, like what are some starting points or some prompts or some things, like if someone were to leave this conversation today and go do some writing, what would you have them focus on?
I'd first have them write down a pure description of what they do. I think this is a practice that's often overlooked by writers and by everybody. It's something I struggle with. I like to move away from description and go into metaphor or like figurative language in some way. But to just force yourself to describe exactly what you do. For artists, I have them describe exactly what their work looks like, using one painting or one sculpture and not appealing to metaphor, not comparing it to anything, not connecting it to any big themes. Just what do you see when you look at this work? And I think you can do that for business people or for writers. What do you do?
Yeah.
Write about it. And I think if you have timed writing exercise, it can be really freeing. So I have my students meditate for 7 minutes and then write for 7 minutes by hand without lifting up their pen, describing what they do. And you can do it again, and again.
And what does that do to like strip away all the other kinds of meaning making and just focus on the actual physical properties of the art?
I think it helps. I think it helps you see, for artists, it reminds them that they are makers of objects, of things that they want people to see. And I think connecting with what you do on a daily basis, what you make, or what kind of paint you use, or what kind of materials you use to build sculptures, puts people at ease, and they're the best authority on that. Whether you're a coach or a graphic designer or a painter.
It seems like a really great bridge to using words, because it keeps them close to the paint or to the nails or to the wood.
And I think people don't believe they have authority as writers, and so it gives them that kind of authority. Like, you don't have to make it sound fancy. You don't have to use any special words. Just describe what you see.
Yep. And I think the other thing that can happen there, it reminds me a little bit of when I do visual storytelling workshops, and I tell people when they comment on each other's things to only use adjectives, and to only use adjectives, and to make at least some of those adjectives be about exactly what they see, even if it's obvious to everyone. So red, scratchy, noisy, whatever it is. And then you realize as you're writing those things that these things do actually have a tremendous amount of meaning just on their own. And there is all kinds of, there's a story being told just through the materials. And so I love this assignment because it keeps people from jumping away.
It's also such a good thing to practice generally. We're not good at paying careful attention to people, to the world around us, situations. And that's something artists have to offer to all of us, is this practice of careful looking. And in a world where images, like how we miss each other, causes us to do harm to one another. Think of police violence or racism or sexism. Then careful looking is kind of a key to resisting all those oppressive forces. So it's an important thing to practice anyway.
It's like deep listening.
Deep looking and deep listening.
So I think we've been going for about a half an hour. There are 5 people watching. You may have questions that you've put in, viewers, but if you have, we haven't seen them yet because of the delay, but now is the time to ask your questions, tell us your comments. Is there anything you'd like to know from them, Sarah? From the folks that are watching? We got five people in here hanging out.
Who are you?
Who are you? Tell us who you are and what you're doing.
What would be useful for you, or tell me about your fears about writing.
Yeah, and I'm in Facebook checking it out, but it's not showing me who's watching, so I can't call you out. Julie DeRosa is in here. She is the Bureau of Tactical Imagination Studio Wizard. She's also an incredible artist. Do you have any questions about talking or writing about your work, Julie? Or do you want to tell Sarah what you do?
This is my first Facebook Live.
This is a great opportunity, guys. It is? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's great.
I guess it's great.
Many more to come.
I don't know.
How's it going? You seem relaxed about it.
I've
like
never
you've done it before. But I guess you've had enough other public speaking experience. Well, why don't you, while they're coming up with questions and comments and things, why don't you give us the details of your artist statement writing workshop?
So it starts in May.
Let people know.
I should have the dates right in front of me, but I don't. It's 4 weeks in May. It's a virtual writing workshop. It'll be an hour and a half at night on Wednesdays, and you'll have homework. And together we'll do a bunch of writing exercises so that we can create material for our artists. And then we will actually physically cut up what we've created and tape it together. This is a technique that I learned from Nick Flynn, the writer, when I was working on Draw Your Weapons. And he learned it from Carolyn Forche, who's a poet. And there's something so powerful about using your body to write. And I think it's super useful for artists. So we'll actually physically cut up and tape back together our artist statement. There's actually a photograph on my website of an example of that. And then you'll get a 30-minute one-on-one phone call with me, and I will edit and help you revise your artist statement. So by the end of 4 weeks, you'll have like a brilliant artist statement. You'll understand writing is a tool in your communication toolbox. And you'll also work with the community of 12 other artists. So you'll have collaborators and people who can help you with your own work.
So great. It sounds so great. Julie says, your workshop sounds amazing. And Julie also says, I always feel silly talking about my work. It's been difficult for me to articulate what I'm doing. She's an assemblage artist. Sacred Relic Studio.
She should come. Do it.
You should come, Julie.
Put the
Kim McGill
link
here
to the registration.
Yes, I will put the link in the comments here.
Great.
Julie says, I use a boilerplate type statement that's lame.
So does everybody.
Yes, that doesn't do justice to your work.
I think it's so interesting. I'll go to a museum and I'll be blown away by someone's art or a gallery. And then I turn around and read the statement on the wall and it's like dead or flat. Or I'll be like, I don't see that at all.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that inspired me, because I want there to be a better bridge between the written word and the image.
Yep. You know, one of my ideas for our trailer for this conversation, because you guys, we got on a half an hour early. I don't know if anyone witnessed that debacle. We were on Facebook Live for about 5 minutes trying to get it to work, to have Sarah on screen with me. And that's why we ended up jumping to Crowdcast. It's a whole boring story. But my plan had been that it was going to work technically and that we could do a trailer advertisement for this conversation in the language of a badly written artist statement.
That would be brilliant.
So it could be like, in this conversation, we're really interested in, you know, exploring the dichotomy of juxtaposition of dichotomies.
I'm going to investigate
just start throwing all the
dimensions of collateral damage as indicated by crater, rock, and imagination.
And the body.
I'm interested in interrogating history's questions about historical events.
In a historical way.
I had a friend in graduate school, and she was dating this guy who was not a graduate student. And we were all graduate students except for this guy. They ended up getting married. And he would make fun of academic titles. So he would just say, like, the colon, investigating histories of colons. You know? And he went through and made like little book spines for all her academic titles that had just like messed up titles like that. He was like, what are you guys talking about?
I love that.
Nothing. And we were all like, oh, it does mean something.
Oh my goodness.
It's a postmodern investigation of language inability to say truth.
Right. Right. You have to throw reify in
I do like
hegemony somewhere. Yeah, I know. It's a good word. Julie says, Amy gave me the idea of writing a manifesto. I don't even remember that, Julie, but it sounds like something I would say. And it actually related to the guy who was making those jokes. Like, one of the things that we've been doing in the class that I've been teaching visual revolutionaries is playing with different frames. Like, what happens when you take the thing that you're talking about and put it in the language of parking tickets or report cards or surveys or newspaper articles or whatever. Thank you. You can use it. It's not, I'm sure it's not my idea. I don't know where it came from. But yeah, just like give yourself different voices and different little assignments.
I have my students do that. And it's something that I learned from when we write in elevated language. He thinks about like academic jargon or the Bible or Shakespeare or poetry.
Oh.
And I do that. It's actually how I wrote one of the best parts of Draw Your Weapons, that kind of incantation, let there be light, that part. But when I do that,
Oh, wow.
When I do that, it gets me in touch with this heightened emotional state that I don't let myself get in otherwise. A lot of rage, actually. But I did it with a writing workshop 2 days ago. And people felt like imposters, like they were writing not in their own voice. And for me, that's actually a useful experience, because if you're writing in a different voice, sometimes you can get to a different argument you wouldn't let yourself get to otherwise.
Right, and you don't have your own like limiting self-beliefs.
They actually liked what they wrote, but they didn't think it was them.
Right. They're like, I don't recognize my insecurities in this writing. I'm not sure this is me. I love that, writing in an elevated voice.
They also wrote,
have to try that.
They used rap lyrics as elevated language. That turned out pretty good too.
Wow. Nice. So many possibilities. So I think that's probably it. We don't have any more questions coming in, but everyone, you are welcome to, and people who are watching the replay, please put your questions and your comments in the comments to this video, and Sarah and I will keep checking in with it over the next week and responding, so we can kind of just see this as the beginning of a conversation and keep going with it. I will post the link to the workshop if anyone's interested in signing up. And Sarah, you and I can talk about the possibility of having a workshop for business builders too, which I'm super excited about. Yay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. This has been super fun. You got me back into interview mode in my Facebook group, and I appreciate it. I was
Thank you, Amy, for doing this.
And I want and good luck with the artist statement writing workshop. And thank you everyone for coming.
Love you, Amy.
Bye. Love you, Sarah. Bye, everybody. I'll hang up.